Nintendo just started charging you extra to own your games, apparently. I don't know what's going on with that news, but if it's anything Nintendo related, you know for a fact I'm going to be listening to it. I'll take a look at it in a moment, so. We'll take a look at it in a second, so. But I gotta check this out, though. I have to see what this is all about. Are Nintendo fanboys finally breaking or not yet? They still need more whoop asses for them to understand that they're, you know... How much is ownership worth? I'm not too sure. Tell me.
How much are you willing to pay for your principles? I know that's a little bit of an almost accusatory question to start a video with, but most gamers will tell you that they care about preservation and that they care about ownership of their actual video games. But caring is easy when it's free, and the question of today's video is $10 more for a physical video game worth it? And that is not a hypothetical. That is the challenge that Nintendo have just laid down in front of you.
Wait.
The good news, you can probably still buy a physical version of their first-party games. The less good news, it'll cost you more than the alternative. In 2025, US spending on new physical video games totaled $1.5 billion, which is actually the lowest since 1995, according to Circana. So it is just 30 years of decline. That's, of course,
Oh, it's because the only reason why is because digital.
because digital is taking over. But there's
Yeah.
a shimmering of good news because the most recent decline of only 11% is less than the previous year, which was a 28% decline. And according to
Oh.
analysts like Matt Piscatella, one of the key factors that actually helped stabilize those figures was the launch of the Switch 2.
Wait, what? So yes, the rate of the decline slowed, but that's mostly because we're nearing the bottom, and the launch of the Switch 2 helped stabilize it. There's definitely something to be said for the desire to return to analog and non-connected devices, especially for Gen Z, but dramatic shift, don't see it.
Because Nintendo people actually like physical games. And of course, while PlayStation and Xbox have been going in the digital-only route with their consoles, Nintendo's held out. That's because Nintendo first-party games usually have amazing physical sale rates, and that's especially because they're not using game keycards, unlike, say, the third-party releases, which means that they can't even spark preservationist ire. So, Nintendo, then, is the last holdout, a bright spot in physical gaming outside of, say, specialist firms like Lost and Cult. But with today's story, even that is changing. Nintendo released a news post detailing a change to how Switch 2 games are going to be priced. And as it turns out, starting with
There's no way they're raising the prices on video games for them. There's no way. Oh my god, dude.
Yoshi in the Mysterious Book, which comes out in May, any digital first-party Switch 2 games will have a different MSRP from their physical versions. Now, MSRP is the manufacturer's suggested retail price. So that means a shop can just sell something for whatever they want, but of course, Nintendo treat it as the baseline. So, when we take a look at the US store page for Yoshi, we see this: a physical version for $70, a digital for $60. And it now seems that this is Nintendo's standard policy, where the digital and physical versions of the very same game will have different prices. Here's their rationale. Nintendo games offer the same experiences whether in packaged or digital format, and this change simply reflects the different costs associated with producing and distributing each format and offers players more choice in how they can buy and play Nintendo games. Now, the problem for Nintendo is that some people saw this as a price increase in the US, that Nintendo had chosen to increase the price of physical games by $10 and punish people who like collecting, preserving, or just owning the stuff that they own. Or, just owning their game off console. Nintendo does not want you to think that way, and in a statement to IGN after the first wave of confusion and outrage, they claimed that they had been misunderstood. Here's what they said: the cost of physical games is not going up. This means that when Nintendo sells digital versions of Nintendo-published games exclusive to Nintendo Switch 2 to customers in the US, those prices will have an MSRP that is lower than their physical counterparts. So what that basically means is that relatively, buying digital is now the better deal. I think it's fairly obvious why. You see, there's a key thing you need to know to understand all of this, and it's that the US is actually central, because Nintendo is technically telling the truth for the US. Now, in the US, first-party games like Metroid Prime 4 Beyond, Kirby Air Raiders, and Mario Tennis Fever all had $70 prices directly from Nintendo. It didn't matter if it was physical or digital, it was based just on the price of the game. But in the rest of the world, the prices fluctuated.
Wait, what?
As an example, in the UK, the new Yoshi game has been available for pre-order since March 10th, and here the digital price had always been £50, while the physical one was always $59. And the same is actually true across Europe.
Damn, they're hella fucking, what is it? What's the word again? They're fucking hella punking freaking the US in general with these prices.
In stores. France has got a €10 difference as well, so in other words, outside of the US, physical games did already cost more. Until this announcement, Yoshi and the Mysterious Book wasn't available for pre-order from Nintendo in the US.
Of course it costs more though, because you know the US dollar bill is stronger though, but at the end of the day, you know, I don't know, man.
Hadn't set a US price, and any retailer or speculator was simply drawing from non-US pricing.
Let's see, so I've been seeing a lot of people saying that Yoshi and the Mysterious Book is $60 in the US, but I can't find a price listed anywhere here. Should be $60, probably will be $60. Weird, it's been confirmed in every other region but here.
And Nintendo's form on releases. So it may look then like Nintendo has raised the prices of this game, but actually in this example, it's not that. They just never set it in America. So when Nintendo says they, not other retailers, are setting MSRPs lower for digital games going forward, they are technically correct. The best form of correct. But it doesn't mean that $60 is what Nintendo games cost now. You see, what they've done here is set a precedent and the rules going forward. First-party digital has to be cheaper than physical. That's actually a relative thing. Nintendo set the highest limit for a game's price with the launch of Mario Kart World. They can charge anything up to $80 for a physical.
Holy shit, dude! I would never pay $80 for even then the Mario gamers. It wasn't even worth it to begin with. Like it was all right, but you know, it's not really doing very well, at least at the very moment.
Physical game and still maintain that promise. So a $70 digital release for the next Pokemon games or Fire Emblem or Mario, but with an $80 physical release, well, that would be fine. Nothing in the new policy would prevent that. And to understand why they may indeed go there, you just need to see how Nintendo thinks about cost. While it's difficult to accurately gauge the future impact, our basic policy is to recognize tariffs as a cost and pass them on to prices as much as possible, not just in the US. That's a quote from Nintendo President Furukawa from an interview in Kyoto Shimbun that VGC spotted earlier this year. At the time, US tariffs are still ongoing, though of course far less than they had been, and Nintendo is actually one of the many companies now taking legal action to reclaim what they paid.
Wait, what? Wait, hold on. What was it? Nintendo is suing the US government over tariffs?
Of course, given
Nintendo of America's lawsuit is largely targeting refunds of the previous imposed tariff that the Supreme Court struck down. The Supreme Court found that Trump could not invoke the International Emergency Economic Power Act of 1977 to put the tariff in place. What?
the whole Supreme Court ruling. But what this also does is it explains their corporate philosophy. The impact of tariffs might be lessened, but the data center crisis and ongoing cost increases, say from the conflict in the Middle East, all do hit, basically in the same way, higher costs. And Nintendo's basic policy is to pass those on to consumers. Unlike the other console makers who would very happily sell their consoles as loss leaders, Nintendo has just always sold stuff at a profit. You know, it's almost as if they've tried to make a healthy, sustainable business. But going back to the story, even before the Switch 2 launched, that's how Nintendo ran things, and it meant that Americans were already paying less for physical games relative to other regions. Nintendo, of course, will always try to minimize how much they are spending, and physical games in the rest of the world were effectively subsidizing the US. And that wasn't all Nintendo was doing to mitigate the problem. You see, their other key move was to split the difference with game keycards. Strange things, basically physical licenses that you could sell and trade, but without any game data on them. It was just a code that would unlock a download. But what it did,
personally, I still think this is the most dumbest thing ever invented, to be honest.
It mean is that bigger games could still sit on a shelf without needing expensive cartridges. Unfortunately, the compromise kind of made no one happy. Hardware fans didn't want a physical token. They wanted their actual game. I mean, hey, You can't ROM dump a token, can you? Now, some devs ended up paying out to produce these cards, but there was no evidence that they really increased sales. And even now, that's changing. You see, a recent tease from a third-party publisher, Inin, or maybe they're called IN, I don't know, but it was via their R-Type Dimensions listing. Well, it suggests that Nintendo have actually rolled out smaller game cartridges. Now, Nintendo later made them retract the details, but it does seem the cartridge is still coming. And what this means is the developers can buy cheaper, smaller cards rather than the 64 gig ones that they've been paying for since launch.
Wait, what? There's been no official announcement or confirmation from Nintendo concerning cartridge storage capacities. Interesting.
So, cheaper cartridges does mean that third-party devs can finally start producing physical Switch 2 games at a reasonable cost. But even with that silver lining, Inin's pre-orders went up $10 to cover the difference. So, physical still carries a premium, and that gap is certainly not going away. So how do we analyze Nintendo's actions? Well, I think it's clear they were not protecting physical media out of any form of principle. They're basically just maintaining that market because, for them, it still makes a shitload of money. People love buying physical Nintendo games, and their first-party games are especially strong in that regard, so they're going to keep doing it. But now, it does not work in the same way because costs are going up, spending is going down, and digital is just a better return on every dollar. So Nintendo are doing what PlayStation and Xbox did years ago. They're not abandoning physical, but they're making sure the economics push you towards digital. And the more that happens, well, the more efficient all of their businesses will be. But also, in a way, the less power that you will have. Because in breaking price parity in the US, more people will probably buy digital. And that'll mean fewer physical games on the secondary market, which is obviously a huge deal for Nintendo, who would far rather, sell you the game themselves than not sell you the game because you bought it off GameStop or something. And where I'm genuinely worried is that against this—
What a fucking— I swear to God, dude, I really don't like Nintendo. I really despise fucking Nintendo and their mindset.
Trend line of diminishing physical spending, rising production costs, and a $10 saving on every digital purchase, that it's just hard to see preservation winning. It's not because gamers don't care. I think we all care about preservation. But it's because caring costs more money every year and it's only getting worse. And that's not great. But
you think they're gonna put a limit or so on how many physical copies they're gonna make in the next couple of years? They'd be like, only the first 1,000 people can get the physical copy of this game, or something like that. You think they'll do that? That'd be pretty crazy if they do something like that.
It's also not great. The huge goddamn price hikes, they are shocking. They're on the PS5 family of consoles. They're a grim reflection of what's going on these days, and you can learn all about it in this video next.
Dude, the PS5 one was probably the most craziest announcement, to be honest. I see what it is. Okay. What question? What did comments say? I remember the lie that they used to give. Digital media will be cheaper because we don't need to make boxes, discs, or mass shipping. I remember that. I actually do remember that, actually. I forgot about that. All they've ever done since is raise the prices. Now they want to charge you on top of that. They are going to keep pushing this until the bubble pops and then turns out and be like, who did this to us? That's what it feels like Nintendo's doing. Physically versions will be JP exclusive. You think they're gonna do something? Actually, I would not be surprised. Like, it's gonna be like exclusive to Japan, but you can't play these games outside of Japan because you need to have a Japanese like Switch 2 or something like that. You can't play it like if it's a global version of it. Like they could possibly do that, to be honest. I made the choice a while ago. If we're phasing out physical, I'm phasing out consoles. PC only for me here on. We didn't make physical games more expensive. We decided to not make digital games not more expensive. Nintendo, dude, everyone's pissed off in the comment sections about this, dude, because of the logic or so of what Nintendo is doing just makes no sense. It's almost like Nintendo wanted far more money than they needed. We had CDs and DVDs, then Blu-rays with our games on because they were so much cheaper than the cartridge to manufacture to put on a game. Publishers only have greed on their heart. The moment you sacrifice cost for the sake of efficiency is the moment you lose customers. I'd be curious to see what the Nintendo people have to say about this specifically on this topic overall. You know, how much I care about this. If you all do is sign the petition and still buy their games, then it's useless. They please their JP fans and save them global shipping costs. It also drives up JP tourists. Yeah, they could do that. They could possibly do that. That could be the game plan that Nintendo could do. Make the physical copies just only exclusive to Japan, while the people who want to collect physical games has to go to Japan, has to go over there to buy physical games that whenever they want it or so, you know? They have to buy also a Japanese exclusive Switch 2 in order to play these games. It could happen. It could possibly happen. That is the possibility. That is probably on the table. I'd be curious to see if they would actually do it. Now, would I be shocked if they actually do it? Probably not, to be honest. I would not be shocked, though. But it'd be a crazy fucking news to be talking about that if that actually becomes true, though. Holy shit, Nintendo. You always find ways or so to always fuck up your audiences every single time. And those Nintendo fanboys and fangirls literally just don't care. They straight up really don't care. My god, dude. They probably got the gag order staff ain't shit in front of money. Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. Well, we will see. Hey, man. Like I said, I have literally said from the very beginning, when they announced this thing and the way how they were doing their cartridges, quotation marks, cartridges, I wasn't going to buy a Switch 2. I was actually going to be one of the people that is, you know, that actually, like, you know, will say and will not do it, you know, because I've seen a couple of YouTubers who said, I won't buy a Switch 2. But then you see them a couple of videos later, they bought a Switch 2. Fucking Mudahar is like one of the best examples from Some Ordinary Gamer, where he said he will not be buying a Switch 2, to then later on, he did bought a Switch 2, you know? And it's just kind of like, I'm like, bro, what is this, you know? This is the problem. This is the problem that I had with specific, like, people in general, you know? Did he probably make his money back? He probably did make his money back on that video, specifically of him, like, you know, of him buying the Switch or so. So it's like, at the end of the day, like, he didn't really lose anything. I'm like, but he just lost a lot of respect in general from a lot of people. Nintendo's able to swipe their credit card. Well, those, you mean Nintendo fanboys, you mean? It's a thing. It's funny enough about it is specifically around my area. So Nintendo Switch 2s are going on sale over here. As in, like, people selling their Nintendo Switch 2. But I don't know. Like I said, we'll see what will be happening with Nintendo. At the end of the day, I'm just not a huge fan of Nintendo. I never will. Used to had a fun time when I played Time Splitter, you know, old school Pokemon games. I'm like, I personally have more enjoyment on old school Pokemon games. He's got his Switch 2 money from those for those and not buying and Switch not buying from the Switch. Oh yeah, that is true. I forgot about that actually. Oh yeah. My brother's ex-girlfriend was a Nintendo shill. She hated on me when I told I was buying Power World, and then later on I had her play it for a bit and she liked it. It doesn't take very long to convince them or so. God Lord, dude. Oh yeah. I bet you there's just some Nintendo fanboys, or just like normal Nintendo people are like, they want to combat against this, but then like the problem is you have these like nasty people in the community that are just defending Nintendo and their actions and whatnot. So it's whatever at the end of the day. Hey man, if they want to do that, if they want to be like that, hey, I said let them destroy themselves, to be honest. Hey man, we try to warn them at the end of the day, but it's just, it is what it is sometimes. It is what it is.